if indeed is necessary. Let's go to this now. The Electricity Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, is giving an update on the government's implementation of the Energy Action Plan. Eskom says it will implement Stage 1 load shedding today until 4 p.m, when Stage 3 will kick in. Let's take you live there now.
Confidence when these units are coming back. You know that at the height of winter, the height of load shedding, this number was sitting at about 18,000 megawatts, and you see now we're averaging the past week about 15,387 megawatts, and in fact on Friday and also on Thursday of last week we were able to breach the 15,000 megawatts of unplanned capacity loss factor. And I said before that we want to see this number being sub 13,000 megawatts, and those megawatts will be either added into the available capacity, or we are going to take out the additional units so that we get to fix them, and we have an opportunity for us to retain these units with some degree of confidence. And then in the area of partial load losses, we are not making the kind of improvements that are required. Again, the partial load losses means that the units are on load, they are producing the megawatts, but it's not at their designed capacity. We average about 6,530 megawatts in the last week. An area of significant improvement is on the outage slips, and this talks to the degree of planning, very precise, deliberate, making sure as we take out this unit. Remember I said there's planned maintenance. If it's planned maintenance, it's us who decide when to take out the unit. So when we make that decision to take out that unit, it means that in the workshop we have the equipment, we have the parts that are necessary, that are required for the replacement. And when we make the promise to the country that will return unit X at this station, that unit comes back on that day as promised, because we have planned properly. The personnel, the equipment, the spare parts are available, and we're able to replace, fix it, and then return it. And remember, when I was here the last time, we're sitting upwards of 2,000 megawatts. When we started very early in May, this number was significantly higher. Now we're at 766 megawatts. And really I commend our team led by Mr. Municipal for the excellent work that they are doing. And it's as a result of leadership, and this leadership is beginning to have an appreciation of planning as a function of the resolution of this energy crisis in the country. Like I said, it's important that we have a baseline. A baseline essentially is a reference point when we want to have an appreciation of the kind of improvements or lack of improvements we are making. It must be a function of some baseline. So what is that baseline? So the baseline, we said we agreed that we are going to use May 2023 as our baseline. On the outage slips, we're sitting at above 3,300 megawatts. So we're failing to return the units at the periods that we promised to return them, and a total of 3,300 megawatts were taken out as a result of our failure to meet our own deadlines. We brought that number down. We averaged about 2,045 in the period of July, and now as I speak to you, we're at about 766. So essentially, you have added an additional 2,600 megawatts as a result of planning, better planning on the part of management. And of course, as you add those 2,000 megawatts, it's able to increase the available capacity, and then it also gives us an opportunity to do what we call good maintenance. So we really want to keep on improving this number, and I want to commend the team for the work that we are doing. So it's important that I share these indicators with the general public, so that there's a greater appreciation that all the matrices or the unit of measure in terms of the improvement of generating capacity are all positive. And of course, on the outage slips, the lower it is, it means that it is positive. We are heading in the right direction. Again, on the issues with regards to planned outages, I've shared with you the work that we are doing. In May, we're sitting at about 3,400. Now, because of the improvements we are making, we are adding another 1,000 megawatts. Of the units we are taking out so that we give ourselves time to fix these units. As we return them, they are reliable, they produce at the percentages that are closer to or approximate their design capacity. And that means that the system becomes more reliable. We have megawatts that are consistent. We are able to support the South African economy going forward. Like I said, on the unplanned capacity loss factor, the rate at which these units were failing, when we started in May, we're sitting at about 17,380, and now as I speak to you, we're at 15,387. So essentially 2,000 megawatts of unplanned capacity loss factor. So essentially, we've been able to undermine these units, the rate of their failure, and we've been able to claw back 2,000 megawatts. And that is as a result of the deliberate nature of how we are approaching this problem to ensure that we improve on planned maintenance. And that's why you are beginning to see resilience in this in the system going forward. And then, like I promised, I want to share with you the area around distribution. I must say that we are encountering significant challenges in this area. Municipalities are owing Eskom an inordinate amount of money. So the overdue debt is sitting at about 63.2 billion rands. The top 20 municipalities alone, they account for 77% of that, about 48 billion rands. And the growth of this debt year to date, it's about 4.7 billion rands. So it means that we're adding more and more debt to Eskom and undermining Eskom's ability to invest money in the generation, the transmission, and also distribution. Because remember that we're still in the exercise of making sure that we create unique entities that reports to the group that is called Eskom. You know the work we're doing on the transmission side, the work we're doing on the distribution side. But this just adds to erode the bottom line of Eskom. So Eskom is not in a position to respond to these challenges because of the debt that is throttling its ability to be able to respond to the challenges. A significant amount of work is being done to address these challenges. And like I said, to my point earlier on, there are communities, as I speak to you, they don't have electricity, not because of load shedding, but because of failures of transformers, because of failure of substations. I mean, just to give you an indication, just the Vaal area, the area of the Vaal there, there's about 680 transformers that Eskom has installed. About 367 of them had to be replaced, or 680 transformers that they had failed and required attention. 367 of those 680, Eskom has already replaced them, and about 313 of them are in the process of being replaced. And it's worrying to mention that 33 of those that have already been replaced are repeat failures. So as Eskom comes and makes this intervention, it's a capex, they run into a similar problem much later in the future. What does this do? It just takes out all the maintenance budget that Eskom would have directed at the replenishment of these assets. It's concentrated in one area, and in the majority of these instances, you find a situation where people are not paying for consumption. So it's an area that is going to receive attention going forward. Again, in the Vaal area, 13 mini-subs had failed, 11 has already been replaced, and 2 are outstanding. I'm just isolating that as one example, but this is prevalent across the length and breadth of the country. And that's why it's important that we have to do something to resolve this. And the conversation we're having with our colleagues from distribution, we're having with National Treasury and SALGA, to find a sustainable solution of ensuring that we undermine, if you like, non-technical losses. So people who are just consuming and not paying for their consumption. Of course, there are those that are indigent. There's a package that is directed to indigent. there's a facility that is made available so that they get a particular threshold of free electricity over a period of time. Those will not be affected, but we're essentially talking about those who can afford and are not paying, and those who are making illegal connections, and these are overburdening the infrastructure, and that's why we are seeing the increased rate of failure. It also has implications on what we call the notified maximum demand, NMD. Notified maximum demand essentially is a contracted amount of megawatts that Municipality X says they want to get from Eskom. As a result of the exponential growth of, if you like, communities, industry coming into the space, and also illegal connections in the main, you find that the municipalities are exceeding that. And how Eskom works is that on the basis of that notifiable maximum demand, they are able to make a determination on the capacity of the assets that are required to be able to support this demand. Once we exceed it, once there's illegal connections, once there's what we call izinyoka, it places a significant burden on this infrastructure. The infrastructure fails, and who are the major casualties? It's the good paying residents, it's the poor who are registered on the indigent, and it's also industry that is not able to produce. As a result, some of the industries in the areas of Lichtenberg, in Ditsobotla, have come out public that they're considering relocation and or closing as a result of demand that is unserviced because of the failing infrastructure that has got a disproportionate impact on the capacity of that space to be able to provide the employment opportunities, and as a result, people will migrate to other areas of opportunity, and then the municipality's revenue base is going to be eroded. And therefore it becomes financially unviable, and those spaces cannot be spoken of in economic terms. So the point I'm simply trying to make is that this has got significant implications, and we're trying to address that. On the distribution side, I always make the point we're addressing the 4 Ds. The first one is around decarbonization. So we know that we have removed the cap on embedded generation. We are seeing a great deal of private sector interest, a significant appetite, almost insatiable. We have 66 gigawatts rather of pipeline of projects by private sector at various stages of project life cycle, and those contributes towards our decarbonization agenda. We're seeing also the proliferation of solar PV households as a part of taking advantage of these measures that have been introduced by the Minister of Finance. Are beginning to roll out a PV solution. Even the state will be coming into that space, retrofitting some of our buildings. And then there's a need for us to be able to democratize that space to make sure that we are able to make transactions by private parties possible. And that's why we are seeing the issues around the requirements for wheeling. There's a project developer, one end of the province, one end of the city. There's a wheeling off-taker, the other end of the city. They need to transport those electrons, and that's what we call wheeling. That arrangement of having access to existing infrastructure either by Eskom and or the municipality to transport the electrons is made available, and that's an exercise of wheeling. We are working on that. And then there's issues around the decentralization. We are seeing the emergence of microgrid, and also that is important just to protect the integrity of the grid so that there's not a single point of failure is something that is coming up, and also the issue of digitization with regards to grid systems and modernization, so that from a systems point of view, we've got a helicopter view and appreciation of what is happening on the grid, and we also have opportunities to manage the grid in a fashion that makes it possible for us to continue to provide the sustainable supply of electricity. And then there are attended challenges. They are not necessarily all of them structural, but these are challenges that have proven to be stubborn on the distribution side, and we are doing everything to address it. Chief amongst those is the municipal debt. is the elephant in the room. Like I said, 63 billion rand continues to grow. Year-to-date growth is about 4.2 billion rand. And in fact, we know that at the rate at which we're experiencing this, even the growth, the annual growth of municipal debt is going to increase and increase exponentially. That makes places a burden on Eskom. It's something that requires attention, and I did make the point that as part of work stream number 10, working with the key stakeholders, Eskom, Salga, were at the table having this conversation, of course, spearheaded by the ministry. There are issues of losses, both technical and non-technical losses. On the non-technical losses, is people who are just connecting illegally. So essentially having access to electricity that they are not willing to pay for, and placing significant burden on existing infrastructure which is not designed to accommodate this surge or increase in the demand. And as a result of that, the transformers fails, the mini-subs failed. The poor are affected, those that are on the indigent register, the businesses are affected, households that are in good standing in relation to their municipal bills are affected because we take time to replace these assets. And part of the problem is because of the rate of the failure of these mini-subs and transformers. There's a supply challenge that we're having. So the suppliers can't keep up with the demand. And part of the problem with this demand is that this demand can't be planned for. Can't be planned for because we don't know at which point is this transformer going to fail, because we don't know who's connecting illegally. Otherwise, the team will be able to plan and give an indication to industry. This is demand, and industry can make the necessary investment, capital investment, to expand production so that they are able to meet this new demand. But this demand comes as and when the units are failing, and that's why it's important that we need to address this. There are issues around income. This is cost of sale. This is an area that requires attention. Of course, it's got tariff implications, but we need to have an honest conversation about what some of these challenges are. And we are seeing that there's a decline in sale and there's a need for revenue augmentation. So if you talk to municipalities, as you know, the configuration of the revenue streams of municipalities, especially our big metros, a significant part of their incomes is coming from the sale of electricity. And because they are placing a surcharge, an additional percentage on what Eskom is charging them, there's an additional income stream. They are able to distribute it to poor communities, to invest in infrastructure. Because they are selling less as a result of load shedding, they are selling less as a result of the failing of this infrastructure, there's less money coming, and these municipalities are becoming increasingly illiquid, and therefore they can't meet their obligation, including first to their employees, to infrastructure, and in particular in this instance to the assets that Eskom has made available to make sure that we are able to address the issues around distribution. Like I said, the debts are totaling over 63 billion rands. The top 20 municipalities account for 77% of that. So it's important that we have an honest conversation. There's an arrangement that has been made with some of these municipalities, especially those that are exceeding the maximum notifiable demand. Like I said, a recap, maximum notifiable demand is contracted the maximum demand of electricity between Municipality X and Eskom, and as a result of illegal connection and growth that was not projected, they are exceeding that number. And what does Eskom do? It does what we call load reduction. So these communities are subjected to a number of challenges in addition to load shedding. And of course, we are making every effort to resolve that. And I've said that we are confident of resolving that challenge. They are subjected to issues around load reduction, because you must distribute the load so that you are able to accommodate for capacity, for demand that exceeds the capacity that these assets have been designed for. So it means that communities in other parts of the country are going for longer periods of time without electricity, not because of load shedding, but because of these challenges, and we are doing everything to address that. There's a number of municipalities that have entered into some agreements. Of course, they do failed to live up to those agreements because essentially their revenue base has been eroded. They are unable to sustain those arrangements going into the future. It's a liquidity problem. It's an economic problem outside the challenges of Eskom and load shedding that requires a bigger conversation beyond the conversation on electricity, the replacement of the assets, and the cost is to make those spaces economically viable. Of course, a key ingredient in that is to make sure that there's quality, reliable electricity supply, and that's why we're doing on the side of the ministry to address this challenge. Like I said, 28 payments plans have been made in place, been put in place with a number of municipalities. Of course, some of the metros continue to owe the municipality, and then some of the metros continue to owe Eskom, I'm sorry, and then some of the payments are made late. I'm elevating this without necessarily mentioning who are those municipalities to say there's a bigger problem. There's a problem of the financial unsustainability of the municipal spaces as we know them. And they've got huge implications on the ability of Eskom to ensure that we are able to replenish the distribution infrastructure. So the message I'm trying to convey is that when we get to a situation where we have resolved load shedding, it doesn't follow that communities are going to have electricity as a result of the failing of these assets. And that's why we're having 3 lanes in the conversation, parallel lanes. We're resolving the generation, and that's the part we share with you consistently, religiously on a Sunday morning. We're resolving the transmission side. It's principally the financing of that transmission, and we're resolving the distribution side. It's both financing, it's the state of municipality, it's also consumer behavior and acts of illegality that are undermining our ability to be able to provide sustainable electricity supply. So we thought that we must elevate the issues around the issues of distribution. Like I said, we are still working on finding answers on how we are resolving that. But the comfort we want to give to communities is that we are attending to all of these problems. We are not waiting to resolve load shedding and then much later we go and address the distribution side. We are addressing the entire ecosystem so that we have a foolproof, comprehensive solution on the resolution of the energy problem, electricity rather problem in the country. When we say load shedding is over, no community should be subjected to instances where they don't have electricity because a mini-sub or a transformer has failed. We have addressed those issues. Thank you very much, DJ.